I'm Rodney Rogers, president of Bowling Green State University, and with me is my colleague, Joe Whitehead, who's the provost and senior vice president for academic affairs and student affairs here at Bowling Green. You know, we wanted to have a conversation today about the importance of diversity, inclusion, discussion around issues of race within the academy. As you know, our strategic plan, Focus on the Future, Goal 3 of that strategic plan talks about empowering and supporting our people. And it's the individuals that are a part of and what makes Bowling Green State University who we are. It's our students, it's our faculty, it's our staff, it's our alums. That's a part of that community. And we talk about empowering and supporting not some people, but all people. Making sure that we are thinking about who we are as an institution and who we need to become moving forward. And certainly the tragedy of George Floyd has once again reminded us of the work that has to be done, that we must find a way to do better. And I'm also struck that we have been working on that the last couple of years of really thinking about diversity and inclusion at our institution. It certainly is about success of students, regardless of their race or background, that all students have the opportunity to be successful here. But it's also about our faculty and staff and ensuring that they are successful. And I think one could argue quite easily they could make the point that we have not done what we need to have accomplished in terms of ensuring that we have a diverse faculty and staff. And so part of the discussion, I'm pleased that I've got a colleague here who I think can share some of his own experience in terms of being a professor in a couple of different institutions across the country, 3 or 4 different universities, but trying to get a little bit of sense of kind of his experience, because I think, for me at least, as I've reflected more and more on this, it is about making sure that I'm educated about what those challenges are, because if we're not reflecting on what isn't working and how can we attempt to make something better, to strive for, which is that every and each individual has an opportunity to be successful and achieve excellence in whatever their chosen field is. So, Dr. Whitehead, tell us a little bit about your background.
My background?
Yeah.
Well, I was a native Mississippian and from a small town in South Mississippi, whose name is Picayune, which means small Spanish corn, and born in the early 60s. And so I hit the tail end of the civil rights movement. And growing up in Mississippi, I had aspirations of becoming a truck driver. Somewhere along the way, I decided to move into the STEM area. And so I did an undergraduate degree at Delta State. I played football there for 4 years, as well as majored in physics. So if you can imagine, that wasn't a very popular combination for a black guy. Went from there to Kent State University, got master's and PhD in physics there, specifically liquid crystal physics. So all the flat panel displays and those type things are based on liquid crystal materials. From there, I went to Georgia Tech Research Institute for 1 year as a research scientist, and I was working on the classified side. That wasn't a long-term viable position to be in. So I went to University of Southern Mississippi and was there for 23 years, from USM or Southern Miss to North Carolina A&T State University. So I went from a PWI to HBCU, and now I'm at Bowling Green State University.
Mm-hmm. So you originally, your career aspiration was a truck driver?
Yes.
So how did that transition occur? Did somebody kind of push you to think about something different than being a truck driver, or did you kind of discover that on your own?
I discovered my own. The trucks were in the neighborhood, so they were powerful. Yeah. So it was a sign of power. And also like to take things apart. And I recall I had this orange duck truck, tell you the truth, it was orange.
Orange, very good.
I think about it. It had a hydraulic piston on it, so you could press a lever and the dump body would go up.
Yeah.
It was fascinating. And from there, we had a set of World Book encyclopedias. If you guys know what those are, do you? Well, that was the internet of the 60s,
Right.
a set of books. And I would look at the science and those type things, and that's what's really intrigued me.
So you made a comment that playing football, physics, being African American,
Right.
that may not make sense to some people.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
Well, based on stereotypes. Based on stereotypes, if you are black male, then you should be able to run fast and be very athletic. Okay, but that didn't necessarily correlate with majoring in a scientific area. And so we were expected to basically be there to play football, not really worry about classes at the same level as someone, let's say a white guy who was there in pre-med and was not playing football. Yeah.
Got it.
Yes.
So you went to Kent State for the physics PhD and in liquid crystals, though, and
Yes.
Kent State's one of the leading universities in the entire country, if not the world, around liquid crystals. I mean, that's clearly is huge strength of theirs, much like our photo sciences area, Kent State's program. So you went to one of the top programs in the world.
Yes.
Did you feel accepted there?
When I went, I had this card to go to a window to get my student ID. And so I took the card to the window, and the person at the window looked at me and said, "Oh, you're here to play football, right?" And so I just finished that whole phase of my life, but that was the perception
Assumption,
based on
yeah.
my appearance. And then, interesting enough, there was, at that time, was Pan-African Studies at Kent State. And this was early 80s, so the May 4th, 1970 was still fresh on the minds of people there, as well as the racial things that were surrounding that too. And so I was told by a person who said that if you just survive 1 year here, you'll be okay. And it was a minority person who told me this. And so that was sort of the mindset that if you can just survive 1 year, then you may be okay. And so that really motivated me, because why would someone tell me something negative like that?
Right.
So I started looking around, but in terms of physics and everything and the people in physics, I felt welcome there. They valued diversity in the physics program. Now, diversity meant that I was probably one of a few Americans there in the program, okay, because of just the trend of Americans not going into STEM areas, especially physics.
So did you have professors that looked like you?
No, I did not.
You were successful there. You made it a year, obviously, and then much more as you completed your degree. But
Yes.
would that have made a difference?
It would have made a difference. One thing that happened, though, was unique at Kent at that time. It turns out there were about 4 African American males in physics there, which was highly unusual. And many of those came out of industry. So they got the undergrad degrees in physics, and they were recruited to large corporations as 22-year-olds. And then they worked for a number of years, and they found out that they could not move up in the organizations anymore. And they then came back to get advanced degrees. And so I had mentors from that perspective of these 40-something-year-old African-American males.
Right.
And so that helped me navigate what was going on in the department.
So you would have arrived at Southern Miss as an assistant professor, right?
That's correct, yes.
And so tell me a little bit of your experience there. Were there any extra, and this isn't so much about Southern Miss, this is more a question just about being a black male assistant professor in physics at a public university that actually is a lot like Bowling Green, Southern Miss.
Yes.
Founded the same year, 1910. There are so many similarities between Southern Miss and Bowling Green in our history and the types of programs we have. But so tell me a little bit about your personal experience at that kind of an institution.
Sure. Overall it was positive, but what happens with the departmental culture. So if you have faculty in the department and they have a reputation on campus, then when you go into the department, you then take on that, you associate with that reputation. And we had people there who were very conservative from a scientific standpoint, meaning that if you were to write proposals to get funding to do your research, then your research is not pure anymore. Okay, and so with my background in liquid crystal physics, which is applied, looking for solutions to problems, that wasn't looked on very kindly. And so I ended up working with the chemists and polymer scientists on research projects. And in my third year review, which is what's called the review midway to your tenure decision, the letter was written and said basically implied that I was just riding the coattails of the polymer science faculty. I wasn't really contributing to the research in a holistic way. And so that was one experience that was interesting, to say the least.
Do you think that was somewhat race-based, or was that more lack of being open-minded about the type of research that you were interested in doing, or maybe a little bit of both?
I think
maybe?
it was somewhat of both, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and I don't know what the makeup, the diversity in terms of the faculty at your previous institution was. You've been here at Bowling Green a year and a half?
Year and a half, yes.
Year and a half now. So you've got a sense of this institution, although you know we learn every day about an institution as we work for
Yes.
and be a part of. But what are some observations that you would have about where we are? You mentioned the culture is important, and ultimately we're talking about how do we empower and support all of our people, faculty and staff, to be successful and achieve excellence. And when race becomes a problem, then we're not allowing people to be successful, right? And so do you have observations for us, or are there some things that we could be doing or should be doing in that area?
Sure. I mean, culture, again, there's this phenomenon in academia that young professors are very open-minded, and somehow when they become tenured and been around for a while, they become more conservative. Okay.
Right.
And so we have to break that cycle, and that it's okay to be different. It's okay to have people with diverse thoughts in your department, because it turns out that in most organizations who have been successful in what they're doing, they're also diverse. And what happens there is that when you have diverse minds working on problems, you have better solutions. And so that's why it's really important to have more diverse faculty at the BGSU for two reasons. One is that there's some complex problems here in the world. And one is, in this particular case, is what's happening with policing and how better education of policemen, and just having a better understanding of American history. So if we have more people who are bringing different perspectives to the table, then we can address these problems. There's also problems of social justice. All those are very complex problems, and we need people from different perspectives working on those problems. In addition to that, we have students here, and all students want to see faculty who look like them, because they can aspire to be like those faculty they see. So when we don't have diverse faculty, then the students of color miss an opportunity to see someone who look like them and say, yes, I can do it. I can be successful. And so those are the reasons why diversity is really important. And as I've talked to a few people at Bowling Green, we've been somewhat successful in bringing in minority faculty, but we've had an issue of retaining them. And so we have to do a better job of retaining. That's where culture comes into play. And as I was thinking back about my career, one thing that happens to minority faculty is that in the quest to have more diverse input that I just talked about, okay, when you have a few minority faculty, then we ask them to do more service, serve on committees and those type things, which takes away from their time to enhance their teaching and their research, which helps them to become more successful in getting tenure and staying. So it's sort of that it's great to get the diverse inputs, but you have to get to a point where you have enough minority faculty that they don't have disproportionate service commitments.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So we agree it's important that we have a more diverse faculty and staff.
Yes.
Not only diversity of ideas and thoughts, but it's also for our students to see someone who can be a role model,
Yes.
and certainly who looks like them, or at least have had they've had maybe some common experiences, right?
Yes.
So this idea of culture, though, I want to pick at that a little bit more, because I think you're right. We've had some success at Bowling Green in recruiting a diverse faculty and staff members, but then longer term retaining and culture matters. So what should each of us be working on to think about this culture thing? I mean, is it an obvious, or at times we're not even aware of what we're doing from a cultural? Is that true? Do you think that's true?
That's true, yes. Culture has two components. There is the component that's visible, and there's a component that's not visible. And you can make an analogy to an iceberg. You can see the iceberg above the water, but 2/3 is below the water. And that 2/3 below the water determines how that iceberg moves through the ocean. And so the culture that we really don't see, but that's how we make decisions. And that determines the character of the institution. And so we need to make the culture that more visible, that's beneath the surface.
Okay, so using that analogy, how do we do that? Because you either can drain the water. Well, no, that doesn't work, does it? No. But how do we get at what's below the water on this?
We can put on scuba gear and dive beneath the surface. So we need to actually look more in depth at what we do and how we do it. That means talking more. And
so having permission to talk about these issues.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, that's one way. And so we set aside X number of minutes of a faculty meeting, every faculty meeting. Maybe it's 15 minutes talking about these issues. Would that help? I mean, I'm trying to think of just...
And it also just looking at the research. It says, how do highly productive organizations, how do they succeed? What are the characteristics of those organizations? And we can learn from that. So
I want to go back to this idea of conversations conversations among colleagues, right? I got an email 2 days ago from a faculty member, a black faculty member, who had some advice. I decided, rather than just send a response email back and then pass along their advice, I thought, well, I'm going to call and have a conversation. So I actually did this morning. I had a conversation, about an hour conversation, and have to admit, I have a much better understanding of the point they were trying to make. And we both agreed at the beginning we're going to have a frank conversation. It was just between us, but we wanted to talk about these issues, right?
Yes.
So we've got to give people the right or the opportunity to have those conversations without maybe offending someone, just to say, I want to have an honest dialogue.
Yes, exactly.